Hello and welcome along to the Westminster Roundup of the Sport and Recreation Alliance. I'm your host, Alex Sexton. Delighted to once again be joined by the Alliance's Public Affairs Manager, Ryan McCulloch. How are you, Ryan?
Morning, Alex. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Fresh out of many meetings discussing the current climate and what's going on, and hopefully the easing of restrictions in the months ahead and what we're doing to plan for that. But plenty of that to come. Let's kick off, though, with an event that was hosted yesterday with the Sports Minister and Tim Hollingsworth and Lisa Wainwright, one of those virtual events, our first APPG of the year, where we got to discuss everything COVID and everything about the return of sport. So Ryan, what was covered?
Yeah, APPG yesterday, the first one for about 6 months, I think. But it was a really good one. We had the Minister there, we had Tim Hollingsworth there, really grateful for their time, and the whole idea of the event was as a look ahead to what the sector needs as we start to move towards hopefully opening up restrictions, so what we need in the immediate term, but also what the sector will be looking for and how we can help government. There are a couple of really good questions actually on how we can help government to show that we are an important sector and we are a vital sector in the recovery as we go forward. We topped out, I think, at 100 guests at one point, so I was quite pleased we got into the three figures. But and there were some really good questions, and we squeezed in quite a few. And I thought the Minister was really generous with his time. Subsequently, we had a few comments that said it was nice to see that he was, both him and Tim were really open in their responses and willing to give kind of the time and energy to each question. And also, I must really quickly say a special thanks to Deanna Davison, who is one of the vice chairs on the group that stepped in at the last minute when Ben Bradley had an unavoidable last minute issue. So really grateful to her, but she did a good job in the chair, and I thought it was a really good discussion.
So many talking points came out of that as well, didn't they, Ryan? And I have to admit, having been there as an observer, that openness from both Tim and the Sports Minister about how to work together to develop solutions on this was something perhaps we may not have seen previously in the sector.
Yeah, I think that's where having the APPG there and the Minister giving us his time and Tim giving us, both of them who are working kind of flat out really during this crisis on their respective areas was kind of unique in a sense. I mean, there are lots of forums and lots of options. We send a lot of DCMS panels, but our members don't necessarily always get the chance to question the Minister directly. And I think he engaged really well and tried his best to answer those questions as honestly and as thoroughly as he could. So I really enjoyed it.
And really encouraging to see so many of our members join us for that session. We know that there are few opportunities to have that open question forum for such influential people who are involved in our work. And I know, Ryan, that you're feverishly working away on more APPGs to come later this year. So absolutely encourage all of our members that when these do come out, please do join us. There's a chance to have some of those burning questions answered. And I think this openness of recovery that we're all committed to will be a theme moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of work to be done on that, and a lot of work in a few areas. Obviously, we kind of need to look first and assess, as I sort of alluded to earlier, and it did come up yesterday, the extent to which the sector is going to need support, both in the workforce, but in terms of participation and a return to participation. And that's going to be financial. Sure, we're going to need to know what the cost is going to be, but we also need to look at, facilities, everything else, what we need to come back to a level where we can, contribute to the economy and contribute to people's health in the way that we have done before the pandemic. And I think there's going to be a time where subsequently after the immediate need, we will want to work with government to show that we are a crucial sector across our sector, whatever it is, in traditional venues, non-traditional venues, and the breadth that we cover, how important we can be in the national recovery in terms of people's public health. So I think they're the two important things going forward. But just finally on the APPG, I would just say if anyone isn't signed up to the invite list who is watching this and would like to be, then please email me. I will put my email address under the kind of speaking notes when we post this. So feel free to email me and I'll put you on the permanent list for invites.
Excellent. And as you mentioned, recovery is top of the agenda at the moment. And not only did we have the APPG yesterday, but I know that you've been glued to the laptop watching DCMS questions this morning. You've just joined me straight after that has concluded. What were the takeaways from that session, Ryan?
Yeah, there were a few sport questions in there. This is fresh, so forgive me, but there was some question. There was a question on Birmingham 2022 and the delivery of the games there, which I know it seems a long way off in the current situation, but it really is just round the corner. You know, less than 18 months, or about 18 months away now. So there's a question on delivery of that and the economic benefits of that, and some legacy stuff, which will be important, particularly as the sector recovers from the pandemic. There was a question on leisure centres and the recovery fund and what they might need going forward. And I think it's widely accepted from the, I forget off the top of my head which MP asked the question, but they accepted that it's a bit of a drop in the ocean for what leisure centres are going to need. And I think, you know, although the minister didn't say it, I think the government realised that there's going to need to probably be more investment in public leisure facilities. So there was some discussion about that, and the recovery fund and distributions have started to, well, applications have closed and distributions are starting to be made to leisure centres through local authorities from that fund. So that formed part of that question, and that was a useful update. A couple of other bits to pick up. There was a question on football governance, which we get every time, but there was a question on the future of football governance. Obviously, we've seen the pandemic highlight some of the issues with the way that football is governed in the different kind of levels of the game. And finally, there was what I thought was quite an interesting question, actually, on some of the stuff we've talked about, which is how we, not just in, you know, where sport is in the queue, but how we encourage people to get back to it once we're open, and, you know, how all the stuff that we need to do as a sector, but how the government can support us in showing people it's safe to return and encouraging people to return back to their sports or to new sports, or to continue the other, even non-traditional methods of activity that people have taken up during the pandemic. So I thought that was an interesting question, and the minister highlighted throughout the kind of questioning that sport is an absolute priority for reopening. So that was really encouraging to hear.
And out of the darkness that has been for the sector over the last 9 months or so, that light at the end of the tunnel and that opportunity that has highlighted how important physical activity is for society as a whole, it is a really interesting point. And that emphasis from the minister that sport will be a priority for returning, and what support we could receive as a sector to make sure that we're ready and available to welcome people back. Boris Johnson has mentioned that February 22nd, he looks to outline a plan for recovery. And obviously there's been a lot of speculation and a lot of commitment that sport will be high on that list. What are we expecting to see in a couple of weeks' time?
Yeah, so you've hit the nail on the head there. The 22nd of February is the date at which Boris Johnson is going to announce that we're going to start to see a reopening, or that he's going to launch a plan. It won't necessarily be that the reopening starts on the 22nd of February, because I think we know that schools are going back in early March from the announcement he's made, which would signal probably the first thing that is unlocked, and therefore the end of lockdown is likely to be early March, first or second week of March. But we'd like to see sport in that first tranche, as we've talked about. And that's the one to really look out for. And I saw this morning on Twitter some circumstantial evidence, I know, but that Boris Johnson is keen to cautiously make sure we can return. Mm-hmm. But sport has been promised to be at the start of that, and I think we need to be ready to show that we can. And a lot of the work we're doing, both behind the scenes but also in the discussions we have with members, is part of that. And I think the key thing for us, and we've alluded to this several times already here, is evidencing to government what we need and what we can deliver. So we have a research project out at the moment, and I can't stress enough how important it is that we get as many responses from your organisations and your clubs, and you know, any of the facilities, venues that deliver for your organisation and your sport, to fill this survey in. It's a survey assessing what the impact of coronavirus has been, and it allows us, or facilitates, easier discussions, more substantive discussions with government on the level of need for the sector, and the level at which the sector is going to be ready to deliver when we return. And it will highlight how important it is that we are early on. And to put it kind of even more bluntly perhaps than that, we can have discussions with politicians, but politicians will want to say that's, you know, that everybody accepts the importance, essentially, that sport can have on physical health, but why? Where's the evidence of the need for the sector? We can't just give out lots of money on the basis that you circumstantially know of some clubs who have closed. We need to show that clubs are closing if they don't get this X amount, or if the government cannot change this piece of legislation, or if the government cannot focus its efforts in this area. So I don't think I can oversell it enough, even though I've just tried there. But that is the primary focus for the next couple of weeks, is please get that research into us. I think it's a couple more weeks to the deadline, and then we're looking late February, early March to start kind of looking at the sort of top level recommendations that come out of that.
And I would absolutely echo what Ryan was saying there. We know some of our members have done individual surveys on the impacts that they face, but what's really important now is that we canvass the breadth of the organisations that we represent to put the case forward for the whole of sport and recreation, to evidence the impact for the whole sector, to say that actually we all need support. It's not just individual sports that need a big money bailout, but actually what is the case for everybody involved in physical activity. So this is your opportunity to work with us, to help us have those conversations with parliamentarians and others in the sector. And I know Ryan and the policy team and others behind the scenes at the Alliance are working with sector stakeholders, and we've all discussed the absolute priority to get that evidence. So we'll put a link to the survey at the bottom of this video, and we strongly urge and encourage you to share this with your clubs, your members and your participants. So away from our pleas on research projects, Ryan, and looking at a national recovery, are there any other updates that our members should be aware of? Yeah,
there are just a few that I've sort of typed under AOB here, but no less important, particularly in terms of evidence and everything we just talked about. A lot of members will have been involved in writing submissions for the House of Lords National Plan for Sport and Recreation Committee. The written evidence deadline was last Friday, the 29th of January. So hopefully members got those in, and thank you to those who worked with us and shared with us theirs. The committee runs throughout the summer, and that evidence will be vital because it's wider than coronavirus. It will be vital. Everything you've written in there will be vital in helping the committee to decide what their recommendations are going to be. But also, if you represent a bit of the sector that they feel that they haven't heard from, it's a good chance that you to possibly get an oral evidence session. So they'll be combing through them for the next sort of 6 weeks, 2 months. They may well publish what's in them. And they'll be arranging, I'm sure, some of the people who are speaking there as a result of that. And on that subject, just to say that well done to Andrew at the Outdoor Industries Association, who appeared for oral evidence last week. I thought we built a really good picture of what the sector needs and what outdoor sport and recreation needs. And I thought it was a really good evidence session, and I think the committee really enjoyed and took a lot from the evidence that he gave. So just a well done to Andrew there.
And anything on the horizon that we should be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. One today, actually, which is the non-domestic ratings bill, catchy, which is in the House of Lords. There's an amendment in the name of Lord Addington and Lord Moynihan, which is aimed at, I think, initially extending the business rates holiday that we've all seen past the end of the financial year, because I think it's fairly obvious and that the sector's not necessarily going to be in a place by the end of financial year where we've been open for long enough that we don't need that support. I think that support's going to be there or need to be there at the end of the financial year and into the next. But it's also a longer term look in the bill at how business rates are dealt with in relation to community amateur sports clubs. So probably one for me to update on next time you and I come together, Alex, but it's on my radar to look at today to see how they get on with that. And we've shared some research there, which we hope will help to make the case in that debate this afternoon.
And something else that may be on people's long-term radar, though, we know a budget is on the way in March, I believe. Yes. Anything that we should be prepared for?
Yeah, so the budget is going to be another key influencing objective and a key tool by which we can push some of the messaging we talked about here and we continue to talk about, including things like the business rates and VAT cuts that we've asked for. We have submitted a document to the Treasury with our requests in it, but it's worth noting the budget's the 3rd of March. It's worth looking out firstly for the results of that, but also just looking at ways in which you can make the case. If you have either through us with the discussions we have with DCMS, but if you have your own discussions with DCMS, really just saying these are the things we really think that immediately the government could put in the budget. And I think the most important of which is the business rates point. So if you're having any discussions in the next month with DCMS, or you are fortunate enough to have any discussions with the Treasury, or if you've got any issues around business rates that you want to represent to us in the discussions we have, then just to keep the budget date of the 3rd on the horizon, and we'll try in the build up to that to see what information we can get.
And of course, you can send any of those questions, queries, or evidence through to us via policy@sportandrecreation.org.uk, and you can stay in touch with us on social media via @SportRecTweets. Well, that just leaves me to say a big thank you once again to Ryan for joining us and talking us through what is an ever complex situation in Westminster. We'll be returning in a couple of weeks to look ahead further to the budget and to analyse what may be coming in Boris Johnson's roadmap for recovery later in February. Thank you for joining us on this occasion, and take care for now.